So, if you'd ask many people what the epitome of Windows, and by extension Microsoft overall, was, you'd probably be told Windows 7, and it's fairly easy to understand why. It was able to build on Windows Vista and improve it, while everything that came after it has arguably been mediocre at best. But it isn't something many people use much anymore now, do they? Today, I want to ask the much awaited question of how usable Windows 7 is in 2026, what can still be done on it, and what games can be played on it. Alongside web browsing, of course. And those are some great questions, so let's just get started. So, for some background, the planning for what would become Windows 7 started before even Windows XP was released. Microsoft intended to have two major versions of Windows after 2000, codenamed Whistler and Blackcomb, with an intermediary release called Longhorn in between. Windows Longhorn was disastrous and was the only version of Windows that Microsoft reset development of. And the reason I bring this up is because Blackcomb had a lot of its features absorbed into the Longhorn project. And after just overall whatever post Vista, Blackcomb got shelved. And Windows Vista, which is what Longhorn became, got off to a poor start. Microsoft basically got to work on the next version of Windows immediately, as they usually do. The first build of this new version of Windows, build 6429, was compiled in May of 2007 and still identified itself as Windows Vista. However, later that year, build 6469 was compiled and saw the NT version number changed to 6.1, and the codename for this new version of Windows was also revealed. Windows 7. Technically making Windows 7 the only version of Windows to not have a codename that shipped with its original name, unlike Windows 2000. By June of 2008, Windows 7 reached milestone 3, featuring but hidden a new taskbar design most are familiar with today, and the following month saw the Mojave experiment. This was a advertising/social experiment campaign that Mojave did, where they rebadged Windows Vista as Mojave, a supposedly in-development version of Windows that they had people try, after which they revealed it was basically just rebadged Windows Vista. This probably helped Microsoft internally in some way with Windows 7's development, but I can't be 100% sure. By September 2008, build 6910 featured a similar UI to what the final version would look like, and in December of 2008, a public beta build was ready, but allegedly got leaked. Microsoft countered this by officially releasing the build shortly after in CES of 2009, and this was quite so popular and of high demand that it caused issues on Microsoft servers, and they had to remove the limited time 2.5 million downloads limit. Around 15 million people took part in Windows 7's public beta testing program, according to The Guardian. And from what people knew, Windows 7 in its beta form was actually fairly great. It removed a lot of the issues with Windows Vista, although it wasn't perfect, and many speculated that it would be problematic for XP users. Also, a lot of people presumed that this version of Windows would be coming out in early 2010. It was instead released to manufacturing in July of 2009 and to the general public in October, and reviews of Windows 7 were relatively positive. The Guardian praised it for being basically similar to Vista, but removing a lot of its issues. And CNET said the same thing, although they were concerned that this would cause issues for people that would be switching to Windows 7 from Windows XP. Windows 7 got a service pack in, I think, 2011, and would be superseded by Windows 8 and then Windows 8.1 in 2012 and 2013. Mainstream support for Windows 7 ended in 2015, a fact that constantly trips me up, and extended support for it ended in 2020. However, for a first, Microsoft offered extended security updates, which kept Windows 7 Professional, Ultimate, and Enterprise in service until January of 2023 on the same day that support ended for Windows 8.1. But anyway, I think we should look at the computer we're going to be using for this. That would be the Dell Optiplex 3020 SFF. Equipped with integrated graphics, that's not as much of a problem as it has been in previous entries in this series, because this time it's a more modern PC, sporting an Intel Core i3-4160, 3.9 gigabytes of RAM, a 488 gigabyte hard drive, specifically a Western Digital Caviar, and Intel HD 4400 graphics. It's also probably one of the latest Windows 7 PCs I've ever seen, shipping with Windows 7 only a week before Windows 10 was released to the public. And it should be said that for some of the games that we're going to be looking at, we're going to need an external optical drive, because put simply, this PC doesn't have its own built-in optical drive, unlike basically everything in my collection. And so with that, I think we should now look at Windows 7 now. Now for this video, I'm getting quite tired of looking at these versions of Windows and their usability in 2026, and so I'm just going to jump right into the softer end of things. You'd be surprised to figure out that there's a decent amount of software that still supports Windows 7. The only two categories I can't really find much that works well in are an Office suite, which can be backed up by an old version of Microsoft Office, or one of the final releases of LibreOffice, which didn't drop support for Windows 7 until not too long ago, and drawing programs. I just literally could not find any sort of drawing program that still supports Windows 7. Like, there's literally none. So, and with stuff like Spotify and Discord, because that stuff is basically web apps on a desktop, you could just rely on it using a web browser. I'm not going to really explain too much. So first of all is going to be Audacity. This is actually the audio editing program and recording program that I use to edit my videos audio. And while it has been bought by a company, it is still a fairly decent program. Though the modern version is not tested on older versions of Windows, the Audacity team does say that supposedly the program will still work on even Windows Vista. A fact I didn't learn until doing the preparation for this video. And to no surprise, it does work. Do ignore this error though, because I don't have any sort of microphone plugged into this PC, but it should work flawlessly. Another program that still supports Windows 7 is 86box, an emulator of x86 systems that I've been quite fond of. It offers a lot of configurations and whatnot. I wasn't able to muster up a working configuration, but that's probably because a lot of my ISOs and whatnot are on my main PC. As to be expected, VLC Media Player also works a-okay on Windows 7. Not too much of a surprise based off of my Windows XP videos findings, and the video editing program OpenShot also works. It may not be a very perfect program, but I mean, it's usable. For context, this is an open source video editing program, and it's something I discovered in 2020, and I used it for quite a few years. It didn't really have the cleanest installation experience, but it is fairly usable on Windows 7. Again, like 86box, I don't have any assets on this computer that really make it easy to test this program. And last but not least, Notepad++. I will address web browsing shortly, but let me get through this first. Notepad++ is a text editor program that has generally supported Windows XP for a long time until it couldn't anymore, and the current version of it can still be compiled for Windows Vista, but without needing to compile things, the oldest it can run on is Windows 7. It's fairly convenient and provides syntax for various programming and markup languages, and it provided tabs well before they were added to Windows 11 in Notepad. It's basically a nice text editor for when you don't need a full-blown IDE. So now, let's talk about web browsing. There's actually a decent amount of options that still work on Windows 7. 3 to be exact. Firefox has been in a perpetual state of extending the support window for the Firefox ESR release on Windows 7 and 8.1, and if you don't like that, there's also Red Fox. I'm not going to go into these in this video, but if you want a Chromium option, there's Supermium. A lot of sites will basically run flawlessly on Windows 7, such as Wikipedia, GitHub, Reddit, Blue Sky, the list goes on, and it's why I pointed out that with stuff like Discord and Spotify, they can be used on Windows 7 through a web browser. And as for YouTube playback, it's perfectly fine. As can be said for Windows XP and Vista, YouTube playback is basically a-okay on an older system like this. In fact, this PC with its Haswell processor can even play 1080p YouTube. So now, I think we should look at gaming. Now for modern gaming, you can't really expect much to really work. Games like Roblox and Minecraft have discontinued their launchers on Windows 7. Steam dropped support for Windows 7, although you could still use an older version of the client just fine. And a number of modern games are also being plagued by a lack of support from kernel anti-cheat software. Basically, the same stuff that makes some games unplayable on Linux. Regardless, you can get old copies of Steam working on Windows 7, but I would not recommend it. When it comes to older games, they'll play just fine. Starting off is Bejeweled 3. Usually I like to look at Bejeweled 2 as it's the game that I'm the most familiar with and the game that I grew up with. I also feel it has a decent balance between lack of gimmicks and gimmicks. However, Bejeweled 3 isn't that bad compared to Bejeweled 2. Endless mode became Zen mode in Bejeweled Twist, and it's still quite fun. There's also things to help you calm down more, however, I didn't choose those for this session. And yes, as usual, fairly solid moves. Next up is going to be Toho 12 Undefined Fantastic Object. Okay, so for some brief context, very brief context, if you've never played Touhou games, then allow me to introduce you to Touhou 12, the hardest of them all. While most Touhou games are difficult, this one easily takes the cake. Some evidence behind this is that while I was able to get through Stage 1 A-OK on the easy mode, I did not really get through Stage 2 that cleanly. Actually, this is what happened when I reached the end of Stage 2. Not as hard, but kind of difficult, is Bit Trip Runner, a game I've showcased in the past. It's a rhythm/runner/platformer game, I guess. It's a game I've enjoyed, but something I've never really truly grasped the genre of. And it is difficult, but not as difficult on PC compared to, like, say, using a Wiimote. And I was able to get through the first couple levels. However, after level 4, I was having a bit of difficulty, and so decided to call it quits for that. Sid Meier's Civilization 5 is a game from Windows 7's days that I find really great and addicting. Is Sid Meier's Civilization 5. Sid Meier's Civilization 5 is a game from Windows 7's days that I find really great and addicting. Is Sid Meier's Civilization 5.
What?
No, seriously, this is probably the reason why the footage for this video, or at least the gaming footage for this video, went over an hour. I spent a lot of time playing this. It's quite fun, and I opted to continue my session from when I was practicing with this game, because I wasn't entirely sure how it would go, but it was quite decent. I made some fairly solid progress, although things started to not turn the best ways in the later end of things, and so I decided to call it quits before I possibly could have upset myself. And last but not least is Battlefield Bad Company 2. Probably the first time I've actually played a FPS of this kind. It was not the easiest. Luckily, it does allow for respawns. However, my personal strategy was to try to hold out and help out when I could, try to get into a safe spot to heal, I guess, and go back to getting at the enemy. In a part that I think went on for quite a bit, I opted to start using grenades and a shotgun, which I can't assure worked the most, but it did get me through that part. So, I think that's fairly decent, I guess. Regardless, I'm not the best at gaming like this because I never really experienced these kinds of games very much, but it is what it is. And that's that. To conclude, Windows 7 is still very much usable in 2026, even if it doesn't have the most programs available to it. There's still a decent amount of stuff that does still support Windows 7, and it's backed up by decent web browser support. Granted, when it comes to if you should use Windows 7 in 2026, you'd probably be better off using something like Linux or FreeBSD, but you can do what you want to do. It's fun for nostalgia purposes, especially for somebody like me, and in the end, it is Windows 7. Anyway, do you agree? Did you use Windows 7 back in the day? If so, what was it like? Do you still use Windows 7? If so, what's it like? Did you enjoy this video? Is there something I forgot to address or something I could do to improve my content? If you have anything to say, feel free to let me know down below in the comments, in my email, or through my Discord server, and feel free to give this video a like. But that's going to do it for this video, so thanks for watching, and have a nice day.